Indeed, your people should have been conquered or destroyed a dozen times by your own history, Ta continued. Nuclear weapons, climate disruption, resource depletion, biological warfare, yet you survived. We're stubborn that way, Li replied. More than stubborn, adaptable in ways we have forgotten to be. Ta turned from the viewport to face his human colleague directly. The Concordat has existed for 50 millennia. We built wonders across the galaxy, mastered forces your scientists are only beginning to name. Yet when faced with the Void Scourge, all our technology proved useless. Technology isn't everything, Li said simply. A lesson we needed to relearn. Ta gestured toward a passing ship, clearly of human design but incorporating Concordat improvements. Your people have already begun integrating our technology with remarkable speed. In a century, perhaps less, the material gap between us will close substantially. And then? Li asked. And then we truly become equals, Tay replied. Not just in status, but in capability. Many in the Concordat find this prospect concerning. Because of our history. Precisely. Your species' capacity for both creation and destruction exceeds anything we have encountered. You build wonders and weapons with equal passion. Li considered this thoughtfully. My great-grandmother used to say that tools reveal the user, not themselves. A knife can prepare food or take a life. Technology is similar. Wise words, Tay acknowledged. I believe that is why the official advisory regarding humanity has been updated again. The final line now reads, learn from them, for they have mastered what technology cannot provide. As human influence spread throughout the Concordat, many species began incorporating human approaches into their own cultures. The results were sometimes awkward, occasionally spectacular, but always transformative. Civilizations that had fallen into comfortable stagnation found new vitality. Problems that had seemed unsolvable yielded to fresh perspectives. Earth itself became a center for interstellar diplomatic innovation and unconventional strategic thinking. The planet that many had initially dismissed as primitive now hosted delegations from across the galaxy, all seeking to understand the unique qualities that had allowed humanity to achieve so much with so little. In the great chamber of the Concordat Council, a new symbol had been added to the ancient display of member species. Alongside the marks of civilizations thousands of years old stood the simple emblem of Earth, a blue circle with green continents, small in comparison to many, yet now commanding a respect that transcended its size or age. The final passage of the formal declaration regarding humanity's status had become something of a mantra throughout Concordat space, repeated in educational institutions and diplomatic training. May we remember that advancement is measured not by the tools we create, but by the wisdom with which we use them. In humanity, we have found not just a new ally, but a mirror reflecting both what we have become and what we might yet be. On Earth and a dozen newly established human colonies, people looked to the stars with fresh wonder. The universe had proven stranger, more dangerous, and more wonderful than their boldest science fiction. They had faced that universe not with overwhelming technology or strength, but with courage, creativity, and an unbreakable will to survive. And somehow, against all odds, that had been enough. An attack? Gil demanded, drawing his energy weapon. No, shouted one of the human aides, checking the small device. Explosives in the lower level, probably anti-contact extremists. Todd watched in horror as the ceiling began to crack. Large pieces of building material broke loose above his assistant Hyun, who had been operating recording equipment near the wall. What happened next would change the Concordat's understanding of humanity forever. Director Kim shouted something in her native language and lunged forward with startling speed. She shoved Hyun aside with surprising strength, sending the Concordat assistant tumbling to safety. The human had no time to save herself. A massive section of ceiling crashed down, pinning Director Kim beneath its weight. Why? Gasped Hyun, staring at the human's broken body as emergency responders rushed into the room. Why would she do that? Ta had no answer. It contradicted everything the Concordat understood about evolutionary behavior. Self-sacrifice for one's own kind was rational. Self-sacrifice for a different species, one just met, defied logical explanation. The human medical team worked frantically to save Director Kim. Their technology was primitive, but their determination was absolute. They moved with practiced urgency, using techniques that seemed improvised yet effective. Her chances of survival are approximately 37%, calculated the Concordat medical officer who observed. Yet they continue to expend resources as if success were guaranteed. They refuse to accept failure, Ta noted, watching the intensity with which the humans worked. The Concordat delegation was escorted to temporary quarters while Director Kim underwent emergency surgery. Human officials apologized profusely for the attack, explaining that a small percentage of Earth's population feared alien contact. "You must understand," said an official named Deputy Director Sung, "this represents a tiny minority. Most humans are eager to join the galactic community." Ta nodded diplomatically, but his attention was focused on the reports from Concordat analysts, who were now deeply studying human history and behavior. "They are extraordinarily contradictory," Jiwoo told him privately. "Their historical records show constant warfare, yet also remarkable cooperation. They destroy their environment, yet struggle to preserve it. They create weapons of mass destruction, then establish elaborate systems to prevent their use. And they sacrifice themselves for strangers," added Tai, remembering Director Kim's actions. 3 days later, Tai was permitted to visit the hospital where Director Kim was recovering. The human lay in a bed surrounded by monitoring equipment, her body damaged but healing. "I apologize for my condition," she said weakly when she saw Ta. "Not the diplomatic impression we hoped to make." "Your actions were unexpected," Tai replied carefully. "May I ask why you saved my assistant?" Director Kim's face showed surprise. It was simply the right thing to do. Any of us would have done the same. Even for a stranger, an alien. "Especially then," she said, attempting a smile despite her pain. "How else do we show who we really are?" Tad left the hospital deeply troubled. He composed his initial report to the Concordat Council with unusual care, choosing his words precisely. "Humanity defies conventional classification. Their technology is primitive, but their adaptive capacity is remarkable. They possess traits that both threaten their survival and ensure it. Most notably, they exhibit an inexplicable moral framework that transcends species boundaries. I recommend caution in our approach, not because they are dangerous, though they may be, but because they are unpredictable in ways our models cannot anticipate." As the Eternal Vigilance maintained its orbit around Earth, Ta found himself watching the planet with new eyes. Below him turned a world of beings who had barely left their gravity well, yet somehow possessed qualities the Concordat, with all its technological superiority, had never fully developed. Humanity, he suspected, would not be content with protectorate status. They would demand equality, and strangely, Tai was beginning to think they might deserve it. 6 months after first contact, the massive chamber of the Concordat Emergency Council filled with representatives from over 200 species. The mood was grim. Grand Counselor Minji, her tall, slender form draped in the ceremonial robes of her office, stood at the central podium, her usually calm face showing signs of strain. "The Void Scourge has consumed 3 more systems," she announced, her voice carried to each delegate by invisible translation fields. 17 worlds lost in total. Our most advanced weapons have proven ineffective. The chamber erupted in anxious murmurs. Displays around the room showed the dark, formless entity that had appeared at the edge of Concordat space 2 years earlier. It moved from system to system, absorbing all matter and energy it encountered, leaving only empty space behind. "All conventional approaches have failed," continued Minji. "Therefore, the Council has decided to seek new perspectives, including those from species recently contacted." She gestured toward a small group seated at the far edge of the chamber. We welcome the delegation from Earth. Director Kim, still showing signs of her injuries from the first contact incident, led the human group. Next to her stood Professor Song, an older woman with silver hair and weathered skin. Behind them were three other humans, a military strategist, a physicist, and a linguist. They looked small and vulnerable among the representatives of ancient, technologically advanced species. Subdirector Dae, a longtime skeptic of integrating primitive species, rose from his seat. While we appreciate Earth's willingness to assist, let us be practical. Humans will be assigned to auxiliary support teams where their unique perspective might be of use, without interfering with our primary response efforts. Director Kim showed no reaction to this dismissal, but Professor Song's eyes narrowed slightly. The human delegation was assigned quarters in the outer ring of the Concordette's massive space station. For 2 weeks, they were largely ignored as the greatest scientific and military minds of the galaxy focused on the crisis. The humans were occasionally called upon to observe, but rarely consulted. Lieutenant Jun, a junior officer assigned as liaison to the Earth delegation, found himself increasingly curious about these strange beings. While monitoring their activities, he noticed something odd. "They're using paper," he reported to his superior, Commander Min. "Physical markings on processed plant material." Commander Min frowned. "For what purpose?" "They have access to our data systems." "I don't know," Jun admitted, "but they requested physical star charts of all systems the Scourge has visited, and ones it hasn't approached." In the human workspace, Professor Song sat surrounded by printed maps and charts. She marked them with colored pens, making notes in Earth language, occasionally muttering to herself. The other humans worked nearby, each focused on different aspects of the same problem. "Excuse me," Jun said, entering after announcing himself. "May I ask what you're doing?" Professor Song looked up, pushing a pair of reading glasses higher on her nose. "Your systems show what the Scourge does," she explained. "I'm trying to understand what it doesn't do." "I don't understand." "Look," she said, gesturing to her charts. "The Scourge has visited 17 systems, but it passed near 34 others without approaching them. There's a pattern here." Jun studied the charts with growing interest. "What kind of pattern?" "It's avoiding certain stellar compositions, specifically stars with high concentrations of elements above atomic number 90. She pointed to her notes. "It reminds me of how certain animals on Earth will avoid areas with specific plants or minerals they find repellent." Jun stared at her. "You're suggesting the Void Scourge is alive." "I'm suggesting it behaves like a living thing," she corrected. "And living things have needs, preferences, and aversions." The next day, Jun brought Commander Min to see the humans work. The commander listened skeptically but couldn't dismiss the pattern Professor Song had identified. "If it is alive, then its behavior isn't random destruction," Director Kim explained. "It's feeding." Over the next week, the human team developed their theory further. The Earth physicist noted that the Scourge consumed different proportions of matter from each system, taking more from some stars than others. The military strategist observed that its movement patterns resembled hunting behaviors. The linguist studied the minimal data available on the entity's electromagnetic emissions. "We believe the Void Scourge is similar to certain collective organisms on Earth," Professor Song explained when finally granted an audience with the full Concordate Science Division. "Not a single entity, but a colony of connected smaller units acting as one." The gathered scientists exchanged doubtful looks. Commander Min cleared his throat. "While your analogy is interesting, we have found no evidence of biological components in the Scourge." "Not all life looks like what you expect," countered Professor Song. "On Earth, we have life forms based on silicon rather than carbon. We have organisms that can survive the vacuum of space, extreme radiation, and temperatures approaching absolute zero. Life adapts and evolves to fill every possible niche." "What would you propose we do with this theory?" asked Commander Min, his tone making clear he considered it a waste of time. Director Kim stepped forward. Allow us to lead a research mission. If the scourge follows the patterns we've identified, we can predict its next movements and test whether it responds to certain stimuli. Against considerable opposition, Grand Counselor Minji approved the mission. A small research vessel was provided, staffed primarily by Concordat scientists, but with the human team given authority to direct the investigation. For 3 tense weeks, they tracked the Void Scourge from a safe distance, gathering data on its behavior. The humans worked tirelessly, correlating information, testing hypotheses, and gradually building a more complete understanding of the entity. "It's beautiful, in its way," Professor Song remarked one evening, watching the scourge through the ship's observation window. The entity resembled a vast, dark cloud with currents of energy flowing through it like bioluminescent streams. "It's just trying to survive, like all living things." Their breakthrough came when the linguist, Dr. Park, noticed subtle gravitational fluctuations around the entity that occurred in regular patterns. "It's communicating," he insisted, showing his findings to the skeptical Concordat scientists. "Not through electromagnetic signals that your technology is designed to detect, but through gravity waves." "Impossible," stated Commander Min. "No known species communicates through gravitational manipulation." "No known species until now," corrected Dr. Park. "On Earth, whales communicate through pressure waves in water that can travel hundreds of miles. This is similar, but on a cosmic scale." Using algorithms originally designed to translate whale songs, the human team began to decode the gravitational patterns. Their discovery stunned even the most skeptical Concordat scientists. The Void Scourge was indeed a collective consciousness, and it consumed stellar energy to survive. Most shocking of all, it had no concept that the worlds it destroyed contained sentient life. To the Scourge, stars were simply food sources, and planets were insignificant debris. "It's not malevolent," Dr. Park explained to the Emergency Council. "It's starving." Its natural feeding grounds in another part of the galaxy were disrupted by a supernova chain reaction. It came here seeking new energy sources. "Can we communicate with it?" asked Grand Counselor Minji, her voice betraying rare emotion. "We already have, at a basic level," confirmed Dr. Park. "And we believe we can direct it toward uninhabited systems, rich in the specific stellar energy it requires." The plan worked. Using a hastily constructed gravity wave emitter, they guided the Void Scourge away from populated systems toward a cluster of uninhabited stars that perfectly matched its feeding requirements. For the first time in Concordat history, an existential threat had been resolved not through superior weaponry or technology, but through understanding, communication, and redirection. As the human delegation prepared to return to their quarters after the successful mission, Grand Counselor Minji approached Director Kim privately. "How did your species conceive this approach?" she asked with genuine curiosity. "Your technology is thousands of years behind ours, yet you saw what we could not." Director Kim smiled slightly. "On Earth, we've long had to coexist with forces more powerful than ourselves. Weather, oceans, predators, disease. We learned early that understanding something is often more powerful than trying to destroy it." Minji studied the human with new respect. "Perhaps there is more to advancement than technology alone." "We like to think so," Director Kim replied, "though we still have much to learn ourselves." The Concordat's assessment of humanity was quietly revised that day. They were still classified as technologically primitive, but a new category was added to their file: possessing unique problem-solving methodologies valuable to the Concordat. The news of the human team's success with the Void Scourge spread quickly through Concordat space. What had been considered an unstoppable threat was now peacefully redirected to uninhabited star systems. For the first time, many Concordat species began to view humans with something beyond curiosity or dismissal. Dr. Park stood before a wall of flowing data in the newly established Human Research Center on the Concordat Central Station. The room had been adjusted to Earth standard gravity and atmosphere, a small courtesy that spoke volumes about their changing status. He carefully studied the gravitational wave patterns collected from the Void Scourge during their most recent communication attempt. "They're becoming more complex," he noted as Director Kim entered the room. "The entity is adapting its communication patterns to match ours." Director Kim nodded. "Any progress on understanding their deeper concepts?" "Some. It's like talking to a being that experiences reality completely differently than we do." Dr. Park manipulated the display, highlighting certain wave patterns. "They don't perceive time linearly. They don't distinguish between individual objects the way we do, and they have no concept of death as we understand it." A soft chime announced the arrival of Science Commander Min, who had been assigned to oversee the human research team after their unexpected success. His initial skepticism had evolved into reluctant respect. "The Council requests an update on your communication efforts," Min stated formally. "We're making steady progress," Director Kim replied. "The Scourge is intelligent, perhaps more intelligent than any of us, but thinks in ways so different that basic concepts require extensive translation." Min frowned. "Yet you communicate with it successfully where our best specialists failed. How?" Dr. Park glanced at Director Kim before answering. "Your specialists approached it as a technological problem. We approached it as a translation challenge between fundamentally different minds." "Explain," Min requested, his tone less commanding than before. "Throughout Earth's history, we've had to bridge gaps between radically different cultures and languages," Dr. Park explained. "We developed methods to find common ground even when worldviews seem incompatible. And this applies to an entity that exists as a gravitational consciousness spanning light years." "Fundamentally, yes," confirmed Dr. Park. "Communication always begins with establishing shared references, then builds to more complex ideas." Their conversation was interrupted by Professor Song bursting into the room, her usual calm demeanor replaced by excitement. "We've made a breakthrough. The Scourge shared something extraordinary." The team gathered around the central display as Professor Song loaded new data. "We've been asking about its origin and nature," she explained. "Today it responded with this." The screen displayed a complex pattern that slowly resolved into what appeared to be a map, but unlike any stellar map they had seen before. Instead of stars and planets, it showed currents and concentrations of energy flowing across vast distances. "It's showing us how it perceives our galaxy," Professor Song explained. "These aren't stars as we understand them, but energy sources. And look here." She pointed to a swirling pattern at the edge of the map. "This is the Scourge itself, not as a single entity, but as a colony of connected consciousness. A superintelligent colony organism," breathed Dr. Park. "Each part individual but also part of the greater whole." Science Commander Min studied the display with growing amazement. "This changes everything we understood about cosmic life forms." "There's more," Professor Song continued. "It's showing us that it's not alone. There are other entities similar to it throughout the galaxy, though most exist in regions we haven't explored." The implications were staggering. The galaxy wasn't just populated by planetary civilizations like the Concordat, but also by vast, ancient consciousnesses that existed on an entirely different scale. Over the next 3 weeks, the human team continued their communication breakthroughs with the Void Scourge. They learned it had existed for millions of years, evolving from simple energy-absorbing particles to its current complex form. It had no name for itself in any conventional sense, but the closest translation would be something like the flowing between stars. Most critically, they confirmed their initial theory. The entity consumed systems not out of malice but necessity. It was essentially starving after its traditional feeding grounds were disrupted by astronomical events. "It's not evil," Director Kim explained to the Concordat Council during their formal presentation. "It simply didn't recognize our civilizations as conscious life forms. Our technologies and structures appeared to it as natural formations, no different than asteroid fields or planetary rings." "And now that it understands we are sentient?" asked Grand Counselor Minji. "It's disturbed by the harm it caused," replied Dr. Park. "It has concepts similar to regret, though experienced very differently than we do. It's willing to adapt its feeding patterns to uninhabited systems. The council chamber erupted in discussion. The idea that the dreaded void scourge could feel something like remorse challenged fundamental assumptions about the universe. One counselor rose to speak, his species known for their warlike tendencies. How do we know this isn't deception? The entity could be manipulating these humans, using their naivety to buy time while it prepares for greater consumption. Science Commander Min, to everyone's surprise, answered before the human delegation could. I have observed their communication methods directly. The translation protocols are sound, and the entity has already demonstrated good faith by redirecting to the uninhabited systems we suggested. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the Council approved an unprecedented diplomatic arrangement. The Void Scourge would be recognized as a non-planetary intelligent species with rights and responsibilities within Concordat space. It would feed only on designated uninhabited systems and, in exchange, would share its vast knowledge of the galaxy with the Concordat. As the human team left the council chamber, they were approached by representatives from species that had previously ignored them. Questions came from all directions about their communication methods, their understanding of the scourge, and their unique problem-solving approaches. Later that evening, Director Kim and her team gathered in their common room to discuss the day's events. They're looking at us differently now, noted Professor Song. No more patronizing talk about primitive species or technological inferiority. Dr. Park nodded. We showed them that technology isn't everything. Understanding, empathy, and creative thinking matter just as much. Don't get too comfortable, warned Director Kim, though she allowed herself a small smile. We still have a long way to go before they truly accept us as equals. The next morning, they were surprised to find Grand Counselor Minji herself waiting outside their quarters. I've come to make an unusual request, she said without preamble. The Council wishes to establish a new division, an institute focused on alternative problem-solving methodologies. We would like humans to take a leading role. Director Kim maintained her composure, though her team exchanged startled glances. May I ask why? Because you succeeded where we failed, Minji replied simply. For 50,000 years, the Concordat has approached every challenge through technological advancement. When faced with a threat our technology couldn't overcome, we had no alternative strategies. She paused. Your species has survived on Earth without the advantages we take for granted. You've faced extinction-level threats and overcome them through adaptation rather than technological superiority. We'd be honored to contribute, Director Kim replied carefully, though we would need to consult with our governments. Science Commander Min studied the display with growing amazement. This changes everything we understood about cosmic life forms. There's more, Professor Song continued. It's showing us that it's not alone. There are other entities similar to it throughout the galaxy, though most exist in regions we haven't explored. The implications were staggering. The galaxy wasn't just populated by planetary civilizations like the Concordat, but also by vast, ancient consciousnesses that existed on an entirely different scale. Over the next 3 weeks, the human team continued their communication breakthroughs with the Void Scourge. They learned it had existed for millions of years, evolving from simple energy-absorbing particles to its current complex form. It had no name for itself in any conventional sense, but the closest translation would be something like the flowing between stars. Most critically, they confirmed their initial theory. The entity consumed systems not out of malice but necessity. It was essentially starving after its traditional feeding grounds were disrupted by astronomical events. It's not evil, Director Kim explained to the Concordat Council during their formal presentation. It simply didn't recognize our civilizations as conscious life forms. Our technologies and structures appeared to it as natural formations, no different than asteroid fields or planetary rings. And now that it understands we are sentient, asked Grand Counselor Minji. It's disturbed by the harm it caused, replied Dr. Park. It has concepts similar to regret, though experienced very differently than we do. It's willing to adapt its feeding patterns to uninhabited systems. The council chamber erupted in discussion. The idea that the dreaded void scourge could feel something like remorse challenged fundamental assumptions about the universe. One counselor rose to speak, his species known for their warlike tendencies. How do we know this isn't deception? The entity could be manipulating these humans, using their naivety to buy time while it prepares for greater consumption. Science Commander Min, to everyone's surprise, answered before the human delegation could. I have observed their communication methods directly. The translation protocols are sound, and the entity has already demonstrated good faith by redirecting to the uninhabited systems we suggested. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the Council approved an unprecedented diplomatic arrangement. The Void Scourge would be recognized as a non-planetary intelligent species with rights and responsibilities within Concordat space. It would feed only on designated uninhabited systems, and, in exchange, would share its vast knowledge of the galaxy with the Concordat. As the human team left the council chamber, they were approached by representatives from species that had previously ignored them. Questions came from all directions about their communication methods, their understanding of the Scourge, and their unique problem-solving approaches. Later that evening, Director Kim and her team gathered in their common room to discuss the day's events. They're looking at us differently now, noted Professor Song. No more patronizing talk about primitive species or technological inferiority. Dr. Park nodded. We showed them that technology isn't everything. Understanding, empathy, and creative thinking matter just as much. Don't get too comfortable, warned Director Kim, though she allowed herself a small smile. We still have a long way to go before they truly accept us as equals. The next morning, they were surprised to find Grand Counselor Minji herself waiting outside their quarters. I've come to make an unusual request, she said without preamble. The Council wishes to establish a new division, an institute focused on alternative problem-solving methodologies. We would like humans to take a leading role. Director Kim maintained her composure, though her team exchanged startled glances. May I ask why? Because you succeeded where we failed, Minji replied simply. For 50,000 years, the Concordat has approached every challenge through technological advancement. When faced with a threat our technology couldn't overcome, we had no alternative strategies. She paused. Your species has survived on Earth without the advantages we take for granted. You've faced extinction-level threats and overcome them through adaptation rather than technological superiority. We'd be honored to contribute, Director Kim replied carefully, though we would need to consult with our governments.